Isabella Torres sat in the sleek, modern conference room, the air thick with the weight of her decision. The contract lay before her, its fine print blurring in her vision as her fingers trembled. This wasn't the life she had dreamed of, a life filled with love, warmth, and family. No, this was survival, and sometimes survival demanded sacrifices. Damian Blackstone, sitting across the table, was a man who radiated power and control. A billionaire with a reputation for ruthlessness, he had the world at his feet. To him, this was nothing more than a transaction. To Isabella, it was her only option. Her sister Mia was dying, her medical bills stacking up like an insurmountable mountain, and her sister's school fees were an even greater burden. Isabella had worked tirelessly day and night to cover expenses, but it was never enough. She had found herself at the end of a long, dark road when Damian's offer had come. Marry him for a year, live in his penthouse, and fulfill public appearances. In return, he would pay her $1 million. Enough to cover Mia's treatment and her schooling for the next several years. As Isabella signed the contract, the weight of her decision hung heavily in her chest. "This is just business," she whispered under her breath, trying to silence the guilt that threatened to consume her. There was no room for emotions in a deal like this. No room for anything except survival. Before we dive deeper into the story of fate, secrets, and unexpected love, tell me, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments and type "I'm with Mr. Evidence." If this twist already has you hooked, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss how destiny unfolds. Mr. Evidence Stories is on a journey to 1K, and your support makes every moment worth it. She glanced at Damian, his cold eyes fixed on the document, his expression unreadable. There was no warmth, no comfort in his demeanor. He wasn't here to make friends. This wasn't about love. It was about obligation, a simple exchange of services. But as the ink dried on the page, Isabella's stomach tightened. There was no turning back now. Their marriage would be a transaction. 1 year, $1 million. Nothing more, nothing less. The wedding day came too quickly. Isabella stood in front of a mirror, adjusting the simple white dress she had bought for a fraction of the cost of a real wedding gown. Her mind raced with doubt, but her heart remained steeled. This was the price she had to pay to save Mia. There was no room for hesitation. Damian arrived promptly at the venue, dressed in a dark suit that seemed to swallow him whole. His icy exterior matched the sterile surroundings, the cold light bouncing off the marble floors. He hardly spared her a second glance as they exchanged vows. There were no promises, no love. Just a brief brush of lips when the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride." Isabella's first kiss was nothing like she had imagined. It was businesslike, impersonal, an obligatory touch. She tried to convince herself that it was what she had signed up for, but as Damian stepped back, his gaze lingering a moment too long, she couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper lurked beneath the surface. Her new life began that night as they entered the luxurious penthouse, a gilded cage she had agreed to live in for the next 12 months. The coldness of the marble floors beneath her feet matched the chill in the air. She reminded herself once again that this was business. Nothing more. Her eyes wandered across the room, taking in the opulence around her. A grand chandelier hung above, casting a soft glow over the extravagant furniture. Damian stood by the window, his back to her as he watched the city below. The silence between them was deafening. He turned to her, his voice low and steady. "I expect no complications," he said, his words clear, his tone almost too professional. "We are married for one reason and one reason only." He stepped toward her, his eyes piercing through her as though he could see straight through her carefully constructed walls. "To fulfill the terms of this agreement." Isabella nodded, forcing herself to focus on the contract. "Just business," she whispered under her breath once more. But that night, as she lay in the cold, empty bed of the penthouse, the weight of the decision pressed down on her. Damian's cold professionalism had left her unsettled, unsure of what to expect next. She had agreed to this life, but something in the way he looked at her, something in his gaze, told her this was no ordinary arrangement. And just as the silence in the room began to feel suffocating, Isabella couldn't help but wonder, what had she gotten herself into? Isabella stepped into the penthouse, the doors closing softly behind her, as if locking her in a world that wasn't truly hers. The grand space stretched out before her, vast, empty, and impersonal, just like Damien. It was beautiful but cold. She reminded herself every day that it was temporary. 12 months, that was all. Her sister, Mia, was getting the care she needed. That was what mattered most. Damien didn't seem to care about anything beyond the terms of the contract, or at least, that's what Isabella thought. He was always distant, his sharp gray eyes scanning her only when necessary. But the small things, the little moments that began to unfold, made her question what she had truly signed up for. The first change came when Damien casually arranged for a private tutor to help Mia catch up with her schoolwork, covering all the costs without hesitation. Isabella had been shocked. "It's just business," she repeated to herself, the words a mantra that helped her remain detached from the mounting tension between them. Then came the hospital bills. Even though they were outside the scope of their agreement, Damien insisted on covering them. "It's what I promised," he told her, his voice as smooth and cold as the marble floors beneath their feet. "Your sister's future is important." Isabella hadn't asked for these gestures of kindness. She hadn't expected them, but they rattled her. She had never seen this side of Damien before. For someone who had seemed so emotionally closed off, so businesslike, he was starting to appear, well, human. And it unnerved her. Every time he did something for Mia, every time he spoke with unexpected tenderness, she couldn't help but feel a shift in the air between them. But the real change happened one night, when Damien discovered something about Isabella that she had kept hidden. Something that would set the course for everything to come. It happened in the quiet of their shared bedroom. He had asked her to join him for a late drink, as if they were equals, husband and wife in the most impersonal sense of the word. She sat across from him, trying to keep the conversation casual, trying to ignore the tension that seemed to hang in the air whenever he looked at her. But this night was different. Damien's gaze lingered longer than usual, as if he was studying her. "You know," he began, his voice deceptively calm, "it's always interesting to learn the truth about someone's past." Isabella tensed, unsure of what he meant. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice steady but her heart pounding. His eyes flicked to hers, and there it was again, the coldness mixed with something darker, something possessive. "I know about you, Isabella," he said, his words carefully measured. "About your innocence." Her stomach dropped. She had never intended for him to find out. She had kept that part of herself locked away, never thinking it would matter to him. She felt exposed, vulnerable in a way she hadn't anticipated. Damien was silent for a long moment, his gaze never leaving her. "How does it feel to be untouched?" he asked, the words laced with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. Her breath caught in her throat, but she remained silent, unable to formulate a response. What had once been a simple contract now carried a deeper weight. Isabella could see the change in Damien's expression, a crack in his professional facade. Something in him had shifted, and it scared her. His cold, calculating demeanor began to crack, revealing something she didn't quite understand. "You're mine, Isabella," his look seemed to say. The thought of her virginity, of her untouched innocence, seemed to consume him, and the boundaries of their arrangement started to blur. The tension came to a head at the next dinner party. They were hosting high-profile clients and socialites, an affair so far removed from Isabella's world that it felt like a dream, or a nightmare. She tried to play the part, smiling politely, speaking when spoken to, but Damien's eyes were always on her, tracking her every movement. As the evening wore on, Isabella found herself talking to a guest about a business matter, her back to Damien. When she turned around, he was standing just behind her, his presence suffocating in its intensity. Without warning, he pulled her toward him in front of everyone, his hand possessive on her waist. His lips brushed against her ear, his voice low. "You look stunning tonight," he said, the words almost harsh as his gaze burned into her. The room seemed to shrink as Damien's hold on her tightened. This was no longer just about appearances, no longer just a business arrangement. His touch, the way he held her close, spoke volumes. He was claiming her in front of everyone, marking her as his. The guests around them paused, some exchanging curious glances, others pretending not to notice. Isabella's mind raced. This wasn't just about business anymore. She had told herself to stay emotionally distant, but how could she ignore what was happening between them now? She realized that Damien wasn't just her husband on paper. He had crossed a line, and so had she. His touch had become possessive, and she was starting to feel it. She excused herself from the crowd, retreating to the quiet of the balcony. Damien followed her, his footsteps heavy behind her. He said nothing at first, but when he finally spoke, his voice was laced with something darker than before. "Don't ever think that this," he gestured between them, "is just about the contract." Isabella turned, startled by his intensity. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. She had told herself it was all temporary, but it was becoming undeniable. The emotional pull between them was growing, and no amount of cold detachment on his part could erase it. But just as Damien's eyes darkened with desire, Isabella realized the truth. She was no longer in control, and that terrified her. Days turned into weeks, and Isabella's life became a strange mixture of routine and tension. Every interaction with Damien felt charged, like electricity crackling in the air. Despite their contract, there was something undeniable brewing between them. Something she couldn't explain, no matter how hard she tried to distance herself from it. She had been careful to keep her emotions in check, repeating to herself over and over, "We stick to the contract." But the more Damien revealed his feelings, the more that mantra became harder to follow. His touch had changed, becoming more deliberate, more possessive. At first, it was small things, his eyes lingering on her a little too long, his hand brushing hers during their meetings. But soon, it was impossible to ignore. One evening, at a charity gala they attended together, Isabella caught Damien glaring at a man who had been speaking to her for longer than was polite. She tried to brush it off, telling herself it was a minor thing, just a flicker of jealousy. But when the man reached for her hand to say goodbye, Damien was suddenly there, his body radiating tension, his jaw clenched. He didn't say a word, but his presence was enough to make the man pull away awkwardly. "Is something wrong?" Isabella asked him later, her voice soft with concern, though she could see the storm behind his eyes. "Nothing's wrong," Damien replied curtly, his tone colder than usual. But Isabella could sense the unease radiating off him. "I just don't like people getting too close to what's mine." The words hit her like a physical blow. She wasn't sure if she was more shocked by his possessiveness or by the fact that he saw her as something to be owned. She opened her mouth to respond but couldn't find the words. The reality of their arrangement was starting to weigh heavily on her heart. The next week, the tension between them reached a boiling point. They were hosting another event, this time a formal dinner, where the city's elite had gathered to celebrate a business venture. Damien's ex-fiancée, Victoria, made an unexpected appearance. Isabella had heard stories of Victoria before, how she was the one who had almost married Damien before they parted ways. The rumors about their relationship had always been murky, but Isabella never thought she would meet her in person. Victoria was everything Isabella wasn't. Polished, confident, and far too aware of her place in Damien's past. She wasted no time making her presence known, walking straight up to Isabella with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "So, you're the new Mrs. Blackstone," Victoria said with a casual air, her gaze sharp as she studied Isabella. "Tell me, how does it feel to be a business arrangement?" Isabella held her ground, despite the sting in Victoria's words. "I'm here for the same reasons you were, I suppose," she replied evenly. "To fulfill a contract." She wasn't sure if she was convincing herself or Victoria, but she refused to let the older woman see her discomfort. Victoria's lips curled into a sly smile, her eyes flicking to Damien, who stood nearby, watching them with barely concealed tension. "I always wondered if you'd find someone like him, someone to take care of you. But you must know he only has space for one person in his life, and that person isn't you." The words hit Isabella hard, and she felt something shift in the air around her. Before she could respond, Damien was there, stepping in between them, his posture rigid, eyes dark with barely controlled rage. "That's enough, Victoria," Damien growled, his voice low and dangerous. He turned to Isabella, his gaze softening ever so slightly, but the possessive edge in his eyes remained. "Don't listen to her. This arrangement is between us, and I don't care what anyone else thinks." But Victoria wasn't done. "Are you so desperate to claim her as your own, Damien?" she mocked. "Do you really think this is love?" In that moment, something in Damien seemed to snap. His protective instincts, which he had tried so hard to keep buried, exploded to the surface. He turned sharply, his hand gripping Isabella's wrist, pulling her close. "You're wrong," he said, his voice harsh, his eyes locked onto hers with an intensity she had never seen before. "This isn't just about a contract. I'm obsessed with you. I can't stop thinking about you. I want you in ways I never planned to want anyone." The words hung between them, raw and vulnerable. Isabella's heart pounded in her chest. She had known there was something between them, something deeper than the business agreement. But hearing Damien's confession, hearing the raw emotion in his voice, shattered the carefully built walls she had placed around herself. For a moment, everything felt still. The guests had all fallen silent, watching the scene unfold before them. Isabella's mind raced, caught between the fear of losing herself in this obsession and the undeniable pull she felt toward him. She had told herself this was just business, that they were two people bound by a contract. But now, with Damien's confession, she couldn't deny the truth any longer. She felt the same pull toward him she always had. But fear gripped her heart. This wasn't love. It couldn't be. It was possession. "Damien," she whispered, her voice trembling, "is this really about love? Or is it about control?" He didn't answer immediately. His eyes softened for just a second, his hand still holding hers with an almost painful intensity. "I don't know," he said quietly, his voice breaking just a little. "But what I do know is that I can't let you go. I'm afraid of what would happen if I did." Isabella's heart ached, torn between the pull of her feelings for him and the fear that their relationship was nothing but a web of control and obsession. The months flew by, the ticking of the clock marking the inevitable end of their arrangement. Isabella's heart ached with every passing day, the once clear boundaries of the contract blurring as her feelings for Damien deepened. She had once seen him as a cold businessman, a man of iron will and unyielding control. But now, as she looked at him, she saw something different. Vulnerability, longing, and an emotional depth that threatened to overwhelm them both. Damien had gone above and beyond the terms of their deal. He had taken an interest in her sister's well-being, paying for treatments and education, far beyond what she could have imagined. He had listened to her hopes and fears, and at times even opened up about his own past, about the painful betrayal he had suffered. Isabella had started to see the man behind the ruthless billionaire persona, the man who had so much more to give than he had ever shown. But just as her heart began to thaw toward him, just as she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of something real, the contract loomed like a shadow over them both. The end of their arrangement was drawing near, and Isabella felt the weight of it like an anchor. She had promised herself this would be temporary, that she could walk away without regret. But the deeper her feelings grew, the harder that promise became to keep. Damien noticed it too. The distance between them was no longer just physical. It was emotional. He could feel the pull between them, the way Isabella seemed to hesitate whenever he looked at her, as if she were waiting for something that wasn't there. But what neither of them had dared to acknowledge was that there was something there, a connection, an intimacy that couldn't be explained by contracts or promises. Something real. One night, as the soft glow of the city lights filtered through the penthouse windows, Damien turned to Isabella. The words had been building inside him for days, and now they spilled out, raw and vulnerable. "I want more than this," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't just want you for the year. I want you for the rest of my life." Isabella's breath caught in her throat. She had feared this moment would come, feared that the deep feelings they had both been suppressing would finally spill over. She had told herself this was just a business arrangement, a means to an end. But as she looked into his eyes, she saw something she couldn't deny. The man who had once been so distant, so controlled, was now asking for something real. "Damien," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I can't. We can't just pretend anymore, can we?" He reached for her hand, his grip firm but gentle. "No," he said, his voice steady but filled with longing. "This isn't about a contract anymore. It's about love." I love you, Isabella. I've fallen for you in ways I didn't know were possible. And I want to make this real." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Isabella's heart raced as she processed what he was saying. She had known for some time that her feelings for him had shifted from obligation to something much deeper, but hearing him say it aloud, hearing him admit his love for her, brought it all into sharp focus. But with that admission came the weight of a decision she wasn't sure she was ready to make. She had never allowed herself to believe that love could be this complicated. She had entered into this arrangement with a clear goal, to save her sister. But now, her heart was caught between duty and desire. Damien seemed to sense her hesitation, and he stepped closer, his voice softening. "I'm not asking you to make a decision right now. I just need you to know that I want more than what we agreed upon. I want a future with you." Isabella's mind swirled with confusion. She had lived her life on her own terms, always making sacrifices for the people she loved. She had never allowed herself to imagine something like this, to imagine a life where love wasn't something she had to bargain for. She had told herself she could walk away when the year was over, but now, with Damien standing before her, asking for something real, she wasn't so sure. "I don't know if I can," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can trust that this is real. That what we have isn't just the result of a contract, or you trying to own me." Damien's face softened with understanding. "I'm not trying to control you, Isabella," he said quietly. "I'm trying to love you in the way that you deserve." For a moment, the silence between them felt suffocating. Isabella looked at him, her heart in turmoil. She had spent so much of her life surviving, never allowing herself to be vulnerable, never allowing herself to believe in the kind of love that Damien was offering. But now, as she looked into his eyes, she realized that love, real love, was the one thing she had been searching for all along. "I love you too, Damien," she said finally, her voice steady with the certainty that had eluded her for so long. "But I need this to be real. I need us to be real. No more contracts. No more promises we don't mean." Damien nodded, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Then let's start over. No more business, no more obligations. Just us choosing each other every day." Their lips met in a kiss that was everything the first one hadn't been. It was passionate, raw, and full of emotion. It was a promise to start a life together, free from the constraints of the past. And as they pulled away, Isabella knew, without a doubt, that this was no longer just about survival. It was about love, real, imperfect, and beautiful. This story teaches us that love can't be bought, sold, or contracted. True love isn't about control or obligation. It's about choosing each other every single day. Even in the most unlikely of circumstances, we can find real connections that change our lives. Sometimes, letting go of fear and embracing vulnerability is the key to discovering something truly beautiful. If this story touched your heart, remember to like, share, and comment your thoughts below. Your comment could be the little hope someone else's needs. And don't forget to subscribe to Mr. Evidence Stories. Join the journey and help us reach 1K. Your support makes every twist in our stories even more meaningful.